Hey, Ellen, it's 11:02. I think you can get started.
Okay, great. Were you successful with enabling the chat?
I'll work on that.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate you. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, or good evening, if you're like some of my guests here on the webinar today. Welcome. On behalf of Advancing Global EDU, I'm thrilled that you've joined us for this conversation today. My name is Ellen Cleary, and I'm the Vice President of the firm. Advancing Global EDU, if you're not familiar, is okay, there we are, is a global marketing consulting firm focused entirely on the education vertical. We work with clients from early childhood through higher education, but most of our clients are in the K-12 curriculum and ed tech space. From initial strategy development to pipeline development and execution, we help our clients drive profitable growth. And one way that we do that is through education by hosting webinars like this one. At AGE, we are forward thinking as an organization, and we strive to bring people together to improve our industry as a whole. The panel that we've assembled here today represents that core value. Two of our panelists are from overseas. One of them has no experience in the education vertical at all, but that's really the point of today. We learn more when we bring voices together, more voices into the conversation. We grow faster and more purposely when we explore those new ideas. And so that's what we're here to do. Um, so a couple of things about rules right now. I want to make sure that you're clear. Now it looks like the chat might be enabled, and if it's not, that's oh yes, it is. Hi, Kim and Amanda, I see you there. Thank you very much. We have a chat box which you're welcome to use. We have a Q&A if you've got questions for the panelists themselves. I would suggest you use the Q&A for that. It will likely be less crowded, and the chat we might miss something in. The other thing I want you to know is that this meeting is being recorded. We do plan to distribute the conversation to you after the fact. And so heads up on that. We are recording this right now. So unless you've been living under a rock, and I suspect you have not been since you are here, artificial intelligence is suddenly kind of a big deal. Kind of a big deal. And for clarity, it's not at all new, right? Netflix has been suggesting things to me for I don't know how long. Google fills out my searches on the daily before I even know what I'm about to ask it. And that's just not new at all. AI, in fact, is older than I am, which is saying something. But what is new is how viral it's gone. How many people are talking about it? How many regular people are talking about it? And if the masses were just raving about ChatGPT or complaining about chatbots on the websites they frequent, or making really cool new AI generated profile pictures for LinkedIn, that'd be interesting. That'd be fun, but it might not be so urgent as a conversation for our industry. So make no mistake about it. The education landscape is being massively impacted and could very easily be reshaped by AI. In an industry like ours that is all about content and pedagogy, the business vulnerability and the business opportunity is mind boggling. So the questions are kind of big or maybe potentially existential in some ways. Where do we go from here? What does this all mean? Um, but before we do that, let's just once again do a brief overview and talk about the agenda. It's super simple. I've already welcomed you and talked to you about the rules of engagement. Strongly urge you to use the Q&A and want to remind you about the recording in progress. Next step is we're going to introduce these fine humans that are assembled here today and give them a chance to tell them a little bit about themselves so you understand why we invited them to be part of the conversation. We're going to proceed then, and I will moderate and focus a panel Q&A. That's the format we're doing here. If you are looking for a heavy slide dense conversation here today, you're going to be sorely disappointed. We're almost through that. And then we're going to close with some panel predictions. If we see your questions while we're talking, we'll try to answer them while we're going through it, if it makes sense. Otherwise, we'll leave time at the end to address that Q&A and make sure that we've done that. Okay? So that's where we're at on that. Gentlemen, welcome to the discussion. How are you guys today? I appreciate you taking time out of your day for this conversation on AI, on how we're going to revolutionize the business of education. I think first things first, it is important since Joe and Al, you are both overseas right now. Matt, you're not from the industry, that we let the folks here know who's talking to them and what and where your expertise come from. Joe, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, I'd love to. So thank you, first of all, for the opportunity of being on this panel. I feel really honored. My background is I'm a former languages teacher. So I taught French for 13 years. I've been interested in technology and how it can enhance learning, particularly language learning, for many, many years. I'm now a consultant, and I've been working very hard recently, running lots of training on the use of AI. But in general, I'm very interested in how technology can enhance learning. I've also organized many, many different webinars for the Association for Language Learning, referred to as TILT, which stands for Technology and Language Teaching. And a lot of the recent ones have been around AI. So I'm really fascinated in how AI can save teachers time. I'm always looking for pain points to help teachers, such as with lesson planning and creating activities and formative assessment activities, and particularly more recently with text to image AI tools, those sorts of things. So I'm always trying to find solutions to help teachers save time and to get rid of those pain points. I've also started a Facebook group referred to as Language Teaching in AI, and that's proved very, very popular. I've already got about 2,900 members of that. So there's so much of a buzz around this. But I think what teachers want is things that just work, that are very practical, and ideally that don't cost money. But I appreciate that to use AI in general, there is a price there. But I think that's what teachers are looking for.
I don't think anybody in the call is going to disagree with you that free is the best price we could offer them. But yeah. The reality of business is what we're here to discuss, right? Al, welcome. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Happy to. Lovely to be here, Ellen, and looking forward to sharing and learning from Joe and Matt. So 30 years EdTech CEO, currently support about 20 million users around the world with educational technology, something I'm naturally very passionate about. I tend to introduce myself as a man of two hats. So on one side, there is the tech side. And on the other side, as you can see on the slide deck, I chair a multi-academy trust as well as an alternative provision academy. I sit on the Regional Schools Directors Advisory Board, supporting schools across the east of England. I also chair the British Education Suppliers Association EdTech Group, representing lots of vendors across the United Kingdom. And with that fusion of those two roles, I'm very fortunate to be able to get out and about and talk about all things EdTech, often around digital strategies, digital adoption, looking at the big picture of how we get technology into our schools around the world.
Wow. I can see why you're a busy guy, my friend. That's right. And Matt, you are our non-EDU representative. Welcome to our crazy world. We're happy you're here. Tell us about
you. Thank you. So, and I wish you had me go before Al. I'm supposed to follow that. But I'm a 20-year veteran of digital transformation in the large enterprise. So most of my career, I've had kind of a technology first mindset, helping enterprises select and implement technology solutions. In the enterprise, there's kind of a whole other set of information security requirements and considerations in terms of user adoption and those types of things. So that's pretty much where I've spent my entire career. And last year, I decided to go back to school, education, and to upskill myself on AI and machine learning. So I entered the post-grad program at the University of Texas, Austin, McCombs School of Business, and kind of nights and weekends learning about AI and machine learning. And then during the daytime, trying to apply those principles, right, as the business community moves to adopt this stuff, right? And it's interesting. So in my career, right, obviously never had any AI projects, come to me, right, in the normal course of business. And I've seen 3 now in the past 4 months. So I don't know if that's a leading indicator or not, right? And they come from different areas, different things. But it certainly looks like AI is here to stay. So I'm really geeked about being on this panel because, frankly, a big part of implementing technology in the enterprise is educating your audience, is educating your employees. It's getting them the tools they need to adopt that technology and use it so that it's worth your investment. So that to me, although I know I'm not in the education space, in my experience, educating your end users is a critical component of success. So that's why I think, and I'm really flattered to be on this panel with all of you guys. So thanks.
No, I appreciate that. I 100% agree with what you're saying. We're always learning, right? I mean, the best business people are always learners, and that's why we've got a group here assembled today. So I mentioned that you're going to be super disappointed if you wanted a lot of slides. This would be the second to last slide that we have here. And I'm putting these themes up here so everybody can see just what we're really going to be talking about in broad ways. This is a discussion. This is a conversation. So, I appreciate that everybody is here to share their expertise, share their opinions, share their thoughts on this. And I want to start with kind of like the big question in the room, which is, how can we integrate AI, in our educational service companies to enhance what we're offering? How can folks use it? How can they harness it? Are there uses in product development, in sales and marketing initiatives, in overall business scalability? I know I'm asking a huge, broad question, but let's talk about it. Anybody want to start us off, Joe?
Well, I think, again, from a teacher perspective, what teachers want to be able to see is it just works. They want to be able to, for example, use it for brainstorming, getting it
Right.
to create lesson plans, and so on and so forth. I think that I think it's really important to sort of set out practically how the large language model, let's say, works, and the way in which it can hallucinate, the way in which it can produce content which is biased potentially. So I think
Sure.
that building awareness amongst educators who are interested in using it is the absolute key, and the versatility of it as well. The fact that, for example, when I'm doing training sessions, I will ask people for a subject or a topic or a year group and that sort of thing, and then I'll just create the resources there and then live, and ask people to ask questions, which I think is incredibly important to, as I was saying earlier, remove those pain points so that they get a good understanding of essentially how the AI is working. And once they've had that demystified for them, then they're going to try it out themselves. But in general, when I tend to start sessions, I tend to ask people how they're already using the AI, and they tend to say things like, well, I'm using it for making a worksheet or making lesson plans and those sorts of things. And I'm noticing as well that there are lots of companies who are integrating AI into their tools if they haven't been doing already, or maybe it's more sort of front and center. And I think certainly in marketing and in promotion, people are saying, our tools are now AI enhanced or what have you, whatever the terminology that we want to use. So I think that everybody is on catch up. Everyone is trying to get their head around exactly what's happening. And I think you've got lots of early adopters who are sharing ideas on social media, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, etc. But it's the bulk of teachers who really are only just dipping their toes into the water, as it were. I think some maybe have had a little dabble, but they don't really see how it can be used in education. And I think that's one of the challenges we have at the moment, to persuade people of the power of using AI and how it can practically save them time, because otherwise they won't use it.
Yeah, if it's too intimidating, if it's going to be more work for them, I mean, certainly a pain point we hear all the time in the US is the teachers are already really stressed. They've got too much to do. I can't add anything else to their plate. Ultimately, right, this could become a very major time-saving tool, but they need to know how to use it. And if they're intimidated, worried, etc., they also have to know that they are the subject matter expert of what they're delivering. That fact that they are the teacher, AI is the tool, they are the teacher. And I think that's a place where a lot of folks are not quite comfortable yet, whether it's because it's too new. To that point that you just said too, I do agree with you. I think that a lot of companies have been using AI in the background for quite a long time, right? Now they're just showing us a little bit behind the mirror, saying you can too. LinkedIn always likes to tell me how I can improve my posts, right? All the time now. Never used to. I don't think it's new. I think they're letting me know that capacity is there, and it's something that I can leverage if I want to. It makes sense. It's interesting. Al, thoughts on that from your perspective?
Yeah,
I'm also curious about. Well, let's start with that. I'll ask a second question.
I certainly agree with Joe. He's been around the block. That's a nice term in terms of his
I was going to say, I think
experience.
you just called him old. This is going to get ugly on here.
we can all take that as well. I think, I mean, I do agree, but I think there's one of the things that's interesting is as we think of the education system and how they scale, and many
Yeah.
now are not individual organizations. There are actually quite a lot of parallels between what we're doing in the technology space and what we're doing in education. And the reason I say that is, Joe's talked there about some examples about things that can be utilized to help save time, create resources, very much the generative mindset. But actually, there's kind of two strands that we're discussing in our schools, and that translates across the business, which is the non-generative, looking at the data we're already capturing via traditional means, whatever traditional might mean to you, and how we're interpreting it. And then secondly, we've got the how can we create new content, things that actually make us more efficient. And so ironically, and Joe kind of touched on it, between what we see on the shiny on the social media feeds versus in schools, actually lots of the AI that already exists in schools is much more about analyzing student data or personalized learning tools. And then the generative, the new stuff is very much the new kid on the block and something that we're just starting to touch on. And the reason why there's that nice parallel is because when we think from being an ed tech vendor, do we learn any lessons from that? Well, obviously, there's lots of things that we do within that ecosystem of a business, whether it's generating content of how do we best communicate, what our products do to our customers, how do we research appropriate resources that evidence what we do. So looking at the tools that we can use for generating text that might perhaps be particularly popular or keyword appropriate for indexing, how we might create and curate video content using some of the nice new video content tools that are available, thinking about how we might interpret customer data within our CRM, our customer relation management program. So, we've got people who try our products, connect with us, contact with us from all around the world. Are there any common themes? Are there particular strands between the people that choose the product and the people that don't, that maybe AI can help us crunch through massive amounts of data? And so
I think that's critical, if you don't mind me stepping in there, but I think that's critical. It's a huge pain point for me as a marketer. Like, I know, oh, these people have the same job title. I don't necessarily know things about their socioeconomic status as it comes through, and whether it might be relevant. It may not be relevant, but AI could allow me to get through data that I'm not currently considering to really drive some of these home and focus messaging, focus outreach, et cetera, in a different kind of way. I like that. I like that a lot.
There's lots of strands that link into that. I mean, I always try and kind of do the parallels because we learn lots within the education space because we're very evidence informed. We're looking for not just the what we're doing and why, but the how and how we're going to measure it at the end. But I think we can see that technology flip across to an audience like today as ed tech vendors. We're thinking about, well, what are the common themes? Is there insights to be gleaned by the pathway people take across our website and which ones have a better output than others? And then alongside that, there's a whole heap of tools that can help us when it comes to process management and flow, whether it's scheduling, within education, timetabling is one of the most challenging jobs. Within a business, actually getting the right stakeholders together, maximizing and utilizing people's time is equally huge. And so there are lots of really great tools, often built into core systems. But we could go through a list of all sorts of tools we could share that are really nice, right the way down to simple things like it'd be really handy if I could upload this PDF of this big document and get AI to spit out a quick summary for me. Let me save some time.
Would be handy. Yes, it would.
And that tool's available. There's lots of tools that do it. I'm a Claude fan, and I use it for that, which is really good. But there are also aggregated tools like Sligo.ai, which we're going to mention today from Matt, which brings together the power of lots of different tools. And so whether we're a Chat GPT or a Bard fan or whatever our tool of choice is, we can start at a basic layer of how can these things make me operationally more efficient. And that's probably something that translates across whether we're talking education or the business space.
Matt, you look like a guy who wants to chime in here, and I think it's
no,
a good
because
time.
I think he's spot on, and I think it's interesting. I have the exact same takeaways outside of education, right? And when we talk about like the strands that we're pulling on, so like my observation is I'm not seeing huge adoption of the Gen AI stuff in the enterprise on the front end yet. There's some dabbling in it, but my experience so far is the real adoption or penetration I'm seeing, and here's kind of like what path are they taking? Like the industries that are very data centric, right? Like supply chain, healthcare, those those industries are adopting like prediction and classification models and stuff. Like they're well down the path of that. And that's not something that's readily obvious. So like, prediction models, whether it's around inventory management in the supply chain, right? What are your inventory levels going to be, 6 months out based on, another war breaking out in the Middle East or something happened in Eastern Europe, right? So I think, we're seeing a lot of adoption, right? That's just not going to be obvious, right, to your just retail consumer.
Right.
Classification models, like in healthcare, I think healthcare is like, you see them. It's really like in school. I was in school with all of these healthcare professionals, and they're all these data scientists, and they were like sharing some of the projects they're working on. It's just amazing. Whether it's like reading images and classifying, MRI, it's just amazing, right? And that's all because those industries have very, very good data. And the last example I would give, right, kind of outside of education, right? Again, not a generative AI example, but I have a project that I'm actually working on right now where I'm helping a customer source a vision model, right? And the idea is, and this is something that costs them a lot of money today, but they need to assess the value of a car that's been in a car accident. And the process that goes into that right now, and looking at the car and getting it appraised and what that costs and what is the insurance. And now there's a vision model where you take 4 pictures from each corner of the vehicle, and they have a vision model that, based on the vehicle and the damage and all of this math, can tell you almost right away what the value of the vehicle is and if it's totaled or not. So like those are
And
like
that's AI, Matt. That's an
yeah,
AI solution.
that's
That's
AI.
interesting.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So there's, to Al's point, there's a lot of adoption happening outside of Gen AI, and I think from the education side, right? Clean data on your students, on your curriculum, right? On all those things, right?
Sure.
That's where you're going to be able to take advantage of that stuff. I know it's a long answer, but I really thought it was interesting because it's almost, what he was saying about education, just for me, it sounds just like all of my non-education customers.
Yeah, these are tools that that we find in industry. I appreciate your perspective though, because we are a pretty data rich industry. Test scores, as an example, being able to identify students who are struggling, and or predict who will be struggling based on certain things. Looking at, there's a lot of data points out there. I don't know how well they're being harnessed at this point. Joe, Al, do you have any perspective on that?
Well, I was just going to say, in relation to sort of data sets, I think what schools are very concerned about is where is the data being stored, and the fact that they can only use tools which are GDPR compliant. And if they're not GDPR compliant, they won't be able to use them, or they'll be blocked, or what have you. And there are lots of schools that take that very, 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 very seriously. And so I think that one of the first questions will be about using the AI is, what is the data set? Where is the sensitive student data being stored? So it's all very well saying, we can upload spreadsheets or what have you, but that's all got to be anonymized, really, hasn't it? Because otherwise you're going to be in breach of GDPR, unique consent, and so on and so forth. So I think that's one of the major barriers, I suppose, in relation to student use of AI, and the whole age restrictions, the fact that you need to be 13 and above and what have you for a lot of these tools, sometimes older. Teachers don't want to get into trouble. They don't want to be doing something that they're then going to be criticized for by the inspection team or this sort of thing. So I think that's very, very important. But I think there's a lot of enthusiasm to use these sorts of tools, but they want to make sure that anything that they do use is in a safe and controlled and organized way. That's my take anyway. Al, I'm sure you've got lots to say on this as well.
No, I mean, Joe's absolutely right. I mean, in the UK, we undertake things called a data protection impact assessment. In essence, what data is stored, where is it, who has access to it, and for how long, and then you can conclude a risk associated. But data is data, the topic of conversation. If we move from what we refer to as an MIS in our schools, where all our data is, in the US, we'd be talking about typically an SIS, student information system, and we'd be thinking about data visibility, parental engagement, FERPA, and other things in the same way. The core is, if we, schools are data-rich places, and so there's where we have to recognize that when we step outside of the classroom, they are structured in a technology sense, just like any other scalable business, because typically
Absolutely.
there's lots of units, geographically diverse, and the considerations when it comes to interpretation of data. Ultimately, what are we trying to achieve? We're trying to quickly spot the gaps in learning. We're trying to quickly advise teachers on things, interventions that the human being skill set needs to do. And we're desperately trying to save them time because there is too much expectation. And we know that one of the reasons we might be driving it, much as we might be saying technology, it's going to improve student outcomes, it's also technology might actually improve staff retention and recruitment, which is another huge challenge wherever we are in the world. And so
it's arguably the number one challenge that when we're talking to any part of this market, it's one of the top things cited by district leaders. I can't keep my staff. I'm afraid they're all going to quit. I can't retrain all these people. One way or another, it comes up. It's a huge pain point in this industry, certainly in the US.
We kind of have a bit of a crossover at the moment. I know I saw this week the World Economic Forum shared data from employees, and over 60% of employees are desperate for AI skills and training. In other words, they're looking for their employers to empower them to do more. So in one sense, when we talk about in school, or we talk about the businesses creating technology for schools, we've got that sense of we need to train the skills. But on the other side, because actually AI amplifies where human is great versus where technology is great, actually in the education side, we're actually thinking about what are the skills that employers actually want from our students when they leave school. And actually the rising skill set is critical thinking, analytical thinking, technology literacy, curiosity. It's all the soft skills that are now referred to as the power skills. So we get this kind of fusion now where we're actually saying the most important traits of human beings is to be really good at the human things. But by the way, they also need to be able to use AI tools safely and effectively. And that's where you look to technology that either has safe data sets curated for a particular sector, a bit like creating your own GPTs and ChatGPT, or where you look for resources, including Sligo, where you are looking at prompt engineering, where you're actually saying the power of these tools, ultimately, it used to be when I first started playing with code back in the 80s, the phrase was garbage in, garbage out. If you write rubbish code, you'll get a rubbish program at the end of it. And the same is with AI. If you ask a silly question, you'll get a silly answer. So understanding how to shape and frame, I mean, they're very human skills, effective questioning. So the two kind of align really nicely.
They really do. Are there any areas of the business of our business that you think are currently really dramatically underserved by AI? Is there a place there people should be using it more on our end?
I'm going to say the sales and marketing teams, which doesn't translate necessarily to what happens in a school, but in the business. And the reason why I say it's underutilized is because there's so much more opportunity right now. That's where we capture so much of our data, and we rely on human interpretation. That's not efficient. And in a world that is getting noisier digitally, it's much harder to be heard. I've got a brand new product. I want to sell it to the world. How's anybody going to hear me when there's so many other ways and other people shouting loud? So understanding how tools can make sure that you are creating content that's linked to trending topics, using the right keywords, the right hashtags, that allows you to curate effectively regular topics that will generate engagement. Understanding that if everyone arrives on your website but doesn't do anything else because they get confused on the homepage, and not being able to do work on the analytics of where they might be able to be better signposted. The list goes on down to the whole, well, actually, nowadays we don't email people and say, buy my product. We create a relationship and we share lots of resources with them. And over time, we build trust in a relationship and they look at our products. Well, that creates lots of content that's needed, and it needs to be content that's evidenced and accurate. And certainly in education, it needs to be evidence informed. So all those things take time and resource, and those are the things where tech can support the human being.
Yeah, I hear that. Matt, Joe, any thoughts on this?
Well, I was just going to bring up the point Al was saying about critical thinking. I totally agree. I think that I've referred to, the idea of Vygotsky's zone of proximal development, the idea of the more knowledgeable other. And in a way, the AI is the more knowledgeable other, but it requires the teacher or the students, if the students are going to be using the AI in class, they need to have a good understanding of the type of output that the AI is going to be producing. As a result of that, they can critically analyze whether the content is bona fide, if it's hallucinated or not. And I think that's incredibly important. So I totally agree. That is one of the skills I think that we need to develop. I heard a really nice example the other day of a teacher asking a grammar question of Google Bard and got some results, and then just gave the results straight to the students, and because they hadn't done a very good job, basically. And then they were working out that they hadn't done a very good job, and that was just a way of raising awareness of the fact that sometimes AI will just produce, inaccurate information, and making that point. Because some people talk about AI being like a learning body, which is all very well, but you need to have a good understanding, I think, of the type of output it's producing based on your own skill set, so that you can then evaluate whether it has hallucinated or whether it has created good content. And there are some teachers, I think, that just get disappointed too easily, in my opinion, because it's made a little hallucination, or it's not quite exactly what they were looking for. And as a result of that, they think, oh, this is going to take too much time, I'm not going to use it. So that's an interesting development as well, or challenge.
I hear you, Matt.
No, I love the concept of like soft skills becoming power skills, Al. I just love that, and I think that's entirely true. My experience, right, in terms of interacting with these tools, right, there is no substitute for the human. Okay, there isn't. There's no magic wand, right? So garbage in, garbage out, right? All these people in the procurement space will come to me and say, I have a really dirty file, dirty data of all my spend. Can I just throw it into an AI tool? No, you can't. Your dirty data problems that you have today don't get better with AI. In fact, they get worse. So, but I do think, in my opinion, I think like prompt engineering, just to kind of pick up on what Joe's saying, prompt engineering is a skill that not today, like in business, you're expected, right? If you're a director or above, you're expected to know Excel, you're expected to know PowerPoint, you're expected to know what, and I think, right, prompt engineering is going to be an expected skill that you're going to have.
Absolutely.
And you don't need a PhD, right? But you do need to invest the time to understand how these things work and how your inputs directly impact the outputs.
Yeah,
I
I
think
agree
that's
with you.
really salient. I just want to add that one of the there's always a yin and a yang on these conversations, and I absolutely agree with Matt there. One of the challenges, conversely, when we think about selling to the education space versus many other sectors, but particularly in education, is that particularly the last few years, we've moved very much into an evidence-informed mindset. And you only have to look at, and I use the example from ChatGPT of the GPTs, which in effect is create your own and provide your own data sets, that suddenly 1 million appear in a matter of days. And I may be exaggerating, but certainly a huge, huge array. And what that creates as a challenge is that schools can't afford to just adopt tools without the evidence of what data sets it's using, its authenticity, its accuracy, how it's evidenced, and so on. Well, they certainly shouldn't be, alongside the data security, privacy, and other considerations that go with it. So,
Are you
one
calling
of the
for transparency with that, or
well,
something
I
different?
would maintain that any good vendor working in the education space would recognize that transparency is key. The data processing agreement should be absolutely clear, and no school would be buying software without undertaking that consideration. But what makes it difficult then is you've got schools wanting effective technology to meet some of the needs we've talked about, but they're now swamped with choices. So how do you separate from them? And you've got vendors spending time and research creating great products that are struggling with how to be visible. And so AI is a tool, and it can also be creating extra competition, because, we could probably all produce our own GPT if we hit the stopwatch and said go in the next 60 minutes, upload some resources, some PDFs, some of things that we've got, and we'd create something. Now, none of us would claim that that would be a saleable product or something necessarily of great credibility in an hour. But the point is, as an end user, you might find that and not know how much work and effort and consideration has gone into it. So I think actually, whilst we're talking about all the way that AI can make our business process more efficient, and we always have to be mindful that if we're selling into education, there are some extra safeguards and considerations that have to be put in place. I think we also have to kind of recognize within that loop that there's also a need to think about the human things, about how do we actually evidence and signpost what it is we're doing, why, and shoving that kind of, here is the challenge, here is the solution for customers, rather than just what we've got shiny.
And I hear you on that. I think you're sort of also pushing us towards this pitfalls of AI as we're getting there too. I am the noise that's out there is all, is the fear factor around it, is Arnold Schwarzenegger about to drop down, our machines about to take over the world? Are we living in a place where, I'm irrelevant kind of thing? But there actually are dangers for businesses, I would say, that we need to, are there dangers beyond this that we need to be thinking about? Matt, looks like you're ready to talk.
Oh, I think yes, there are dangers, right? But I think they're common sense dangers, right? So we've talked at length, right, about data, your sources of data, your controls, your moderation. I think like bigger picture, I would make one observation, because we hear dangers and there's hype and then there's fear mongering, right?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
It's kind of like, and everyone's kind of stuck in the middle, right? And
Mhm.
I would just say this: the more I study in school, the more I study AI and machine learning, the more awestruck I am by the human brain. AI and machine, like these, they have so far to go to catch up to the human brain. It's not, we're a long way off from sentience. Okay. So I think everyone just needs to kind of take a step back, right? And understand that piece. And then
Good.
apply the normal kind of governance and kind of compliance mindset that you would use distributing any other type of technology. I think those would be like I mean, there's a lot of danger. Yes. In a world where disinformation spreads so easily, the ability
Right.
to make really compelling, authentic looking disinformation, that's obviously scary. But I wouldn't leave my house if I thought about all the scary things in this world. So I think the better way to think about this is, right, AI and machine learning is impressive. Don't get fooled into thinking it's a human, because it's not. It's numbers, it's text being converted to numbers, calculations being run, converted back to text. And I think it's important to keep that in mind, certainly over the next 5 or 6 years. And don't lose sight of the basics: data security, data integrity, administration, management, moderation. I really think that's where the true danger lies. Mismanagement, not something kind of an out of the box danger. It's kind of whose hands is it in, I don't know
Yeah.
if that's a good answer, Ellen, but
No, I think it's a really good answer, because we've been talking up to right now about the importance of the humanity in this as well too. AI can shorten up timetables at a way, to Al's point before, that we can't even fathom. Taking all that information and being able to have any kind of reasonable output in an hour is something that AI can do in seconds. But if you've ever poorly prompted something, and if you've ever tried to figure out what you were trying to say, et cetera, anybody who just puts out something that an AI spit out based on its limited knowledge of things without adding the humanity back in, it can simulate humor, it can simulate, empathy and all that kind of stuff, but it doesn't actually have those things, and it requires those soft skills that we've been referencing, that human touch to not only fact check, but tone check and audience check and all those things after the fact, based on what we all know to be true.
It's an interesting one in a way that the biggest advancement in the last year has been natural language processing. And where we used to have that benchmark of the Turing test, can it trick us into thinking we're talking to a human? Well, natural language processing has probably reached the point where the Turing test isn't really a valid measure of artificial intelligence. It's now a very different measure, and we keep moving the goalposts. In terms of risks, one of the things is the word risk is not something that we take lightly within the education space.
Yeah.
We try and mitigate risk. So the first thing is to understand there isn't a race to adoption. There's no prize for the school that has the most AI within it. But if we can find ways to measure and safely train staff to use tools that will save them time, and students to be able to further develop their understanding in topics, that's got to be positive. I would argue the risks are not that we're all going to get taken over by robots or humans aren't there, because in many ways,
Cool.
AI, as we've discussed, has amplified those human skills. The risk is that we don't adapt in education to understand the importance of those skills, whether it's our digital citizenship to keep us safe, or whether it's all those critical thinking and questioning skills. And education systems are notoriously slow to adapt. I mean, where we're sitting here in the UK, you know, our system's largely unchanged for the last 100 years. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but the core philosophy is there. And business is the same. There's a risk that we have these tools and we rely on things, but we don't have the human skills to actually say, are we doing it right? Is this correct? Are we challenging the authenticity of the content we're doing? And also, you know, one of the biggest values in a business is the skills and experience of your workforce. People stick around because they feel needed and appreciated and given some sense of accountability and responsibility. So what we also need to make sure of is that we don't think that we diminish that by just saying, well, we can get some tools that will do it. What we want is people with the right skills to leverage those tools to make them far more impactful and efficient. And so it's not a case of one or the other, it's how they work in harmony more effectively.
That's great. Joe, do you have anything you want to add here, or are we?
Well, I was going to say there's an interesting question in the chat from Amanda saying, is there a good answer or tool for student data privacy when doing data analysis in schools? And that's one of the big, key issues I think that we've all been talking about. I think that if schools are able to have some sort of ring-fenced data set or locally stored data set in order to do data analysis safely and securely, then I think the teachers will be happy to encourage the students to use the AI. But I think we just need to make sure that everything is safe. I was at a conference on Friday, and I was just talking about the age restrictions of using, for example, ChatGPT. And one teacher looked absolutely agog because he said, "Oh, I didn't realize that there was an age restriction. We've just been basically told, to encourage the students to use it." And he would look really, like white-faced about that. And obviously there's an onus on him individually, but as well as the school. And that's why I'm always saying all schools have got to have an AI policy now, and thinking that probably a lot of them haven't either written one yet or are in the process of writing one because it is moving so quickly. But the fact that that teacher was absolutely shocked that that was the case, he just didn't realize that was that the age restriction was a really key idea. And so again, I know I keep saying it, but just keeping the students safe, the data safe, so that we can then move forward confidently.
Just on
It's
that
one
point,
of the
Joe,
realities of our industry, right? That our end users can be 8 years old. very, very routinely. And so how we use it and how we position it for teacher use, for district use, et cetera, is entirely different in so many ways than how we would position it potentially as a tool for students in the classroom. Al.
Ellen, just to answer that question as well, I mean, depending on the
Yeah.
scenario, if you, for example, are an Office 365 school and your school wants to do more extensive data analysis, then you can look at things like Power BI, because potentially the data should stay within your tenancy so that you don't risk it. If you're using a cloud-based MIS, if you're the UK, SIS in America, increasingly now they're providing the analytical tools using AI, non-generative, I might stress, to allow you to do multi-school analysis and spot gaps, differences, and so on. Now, there are obviously all platforms offer a range of tools. Absolutely right. If you look at third-party tools, you've then got to undertake that data protection assessment, and you've got to make it clear. I think in the US, particularly with recent conversations over the last year, that you've got transparency for parents of what tools are being used and where data is being taken. But I have to stress, we worry about AI tools and we worry about making sure that children at the right age don't use them, and rightly so. But children will access these tools. They will get them at home. They are already using them on devices. We have to be really mindful that whether we agree or not, the most important part of our role is to educate them of the skills to use them safely, to understand what data does get shared, what not to share and what to share, and make sure that from an educational point of view, that prompting, that understanding, how do you actually take something and discover more about it to develop your understanding? We're back to skills, but I think, was it 6 months ago, some of the school districts in the US, maybe a year ago, were saying they were going to ban AI. I mean, the reality of that is, to what end? That's like saying to keep a child safe, we're just not going to look. You know, you fundamentally, you've got to deliver the skills to allow people to use something, because you can't prevent them accessing it in the entirety of their lives.
It's not entirely analogous, but I recall that my high school banned us from smoking, and I was very good at not doing that. But I don't think they were successful in keeping, cigarettes out of the hands of people who were inclined to do that to begin with. And that's arguably a bad habit versus a tool that could help me be better, stronger, faster. And I'm super curious about it because I'm tech native to begin with, and I think about things in a different kind of way.
Imagine if your school had taken the decision to say, we're going to stop children smoking, but we're just not going to mention them, and we're not going to tell them how harmful they are or how they need to be wary of. And that's, much as AI is not a comparison for smoking, it's the same mindset. Even if you don't want them to use it, share the skills and tools to make sure they can use it with purpose safely.
Exactly. That totally makes sense to me. We're getting tight on time. I want to make sure that we've answered questions. There's a handful more coming through in the chat, and I haven't personally been able to look at them all yet. But I think one of the things that's really interesting right now, and I value the three of you on this panel, is a year ago, like literally January 2023, I barely knew my login for ChatGPT. I only occasionally would do it, and it was if my blank paper had been painful for too long, or something like that. Now I just keep it open a lot of the time to ask it a question to see if I'm thinking about things. Is there a better way for me to phrase this one thing? And there's tools built into, I mentioned earlier, LinkedIn asked me if I want some help improving my post, things like that. I routinely use these kinds of tools, and I wouldn't have guessed that a year ago that I'm here. So any predictions?
Yeah, I would say, I think you're spot on. And I think the primary thing we're going to see is we're going to see continued adoption at big companies, right? With kind of these more infrastructure driven events where they're adopting machine learning, AI, prediction, classification models, right? I think we're going to continue to see a lot of what I call vertical SaaS players, which is the software vendors that focus on a specific, like software vendors in the EDU space would be considered, that's vertical software, right? They're software specifically, right? But in the enterprise, right? You have marketing, you have procurement, you have HR, right? You have like all of these different disciplines, right? That all have their own vertical SaaS. And what we're seeing is all of those platforms are adopting and embedding AI. So I think you're going to see, think of it as like if you submerged your house underwater, all the different ways water would be leaking into your house. That's how AI is going to be leaking into your daily activities, coming in every app, every corner, right? Personal, social, that. And I will say this, I mean, I'm always a glass half full kind of guy, but I think there is a massive benefit to humanity. And I'm just going to give you an example. I can log in right now to Vertex AI and download Llama 2, which is Facebook's brand new open source language model, supposedly bigger than GPT. I could load that onto my laptop and drive out to the Serengeti and have no internet connection and have a big chunk of the world's information available at my fingertips. I think the global implications for education and AI are amazing, because one of the big challenges especially like in the underdeveloped, I'm thinking more like in the underdeveloped world and stuff, the human element, the human resources, the logistics required, right, around all of that. AI so I think there's a massive benefit in education. Let me just leave it at that. And obviously healthcare and biotech, some of the stuff they're doing is amazing. So I think it's going to be coming at us from all directions. I think be not afraid, take the time, and put on your seatbelt, because who knows what's coming next.
Joe, Al, any predictions from your side?
I was just going to say, my use of AI is similar to what you were saying, Ellen, about, like a year ago, not really playing around it that much, but as a result of the obvious interest and hype around it, I then wanted to follow lots of blog posts, listen to podcasts, watch YouTube clips, etc., all about AI. And then I really viewed it as a type of playground, I suppose, just playing around with the different ideas, trying things out in say ChatGPT, and discovering the base use cases for what it is that I'm trying to achieve. And being in different Facebook communities, I think that's been very, very useful, in LinkedIn, and just sharing ideas and working out, for example, an example. Recently, I appeared on a podcast about AI in education, and had the audio file afterwards, put it into Word, was able to create a transcript, uploaded it into Claude AI, which I'm a big fan of as well. It was able to make show notes for me, including live links. I then sent it back to the person who I'd done the interview with, and describing what I'd done with it. And he said, wow, an amazing example of use of AI. So I think just having it, viewing it as a playground, playing around with the different ideas, seeing what works, see what doesn't work as well, is certainly the way in which I'm trying to adopt this, which I've been doing for years. It just so happens that the latest wave is around AI, and it's just exploring what it can do, and sharing the results with other people, and chatting and discussing as we are right now.
Fantastic. Al, some closing thoughts?
Yeah, I think the first thing to be aware of is, I think the landscape of education is fundamentally changing. We're already starting to see, with the capacity challenges within education, but also with an ever-growing global population and many playing catch-up in terms of education. We're seeing hybrid education becoming genuinely something that's starting to be embedded. That hybrid education, children spending sometimes in school, sometimes online, opens up the need for safe and innovative technology to support personalized learning pathways. So technology is empowering accessibility to technology, leveling up and leveling the playing field, which I think is really, really huge. I also am really, really conscious in schools that I think there is a little bit of a pushback to actually, let's get a better grip on our data and what we're doing first of all. So I don't think we're necessarily going to accelerate in the education space as quickly as the business space. And actually, that's probably the right thing, because we need to make sure that we're not putting the wrong things in the hands of our students. But I think if we think about the landscape changing, technology is the enabler and the facilitator. We can't have hybrid schools and hybrid working without that technology. So it's going to be a very busy few years, I think, in terms of how we see technology adding to the teacher toolkit.
No, I appreciate that. Thanks very much for all that. And thanks everybody for your time today. Half of us are well past quitting time, and the other half of us have meetings and stuff to go to, like so many of the folks listening here today. I hope the conversation that we've had here today was interesting, that it made you think about something new, or maybe something old in a new way. And it feels like there's so many different directions businesses can go in when it comes to AI, how best to leverage it for gain, no matter how you do it, whether it's new product development or product line extensions, sales and marketing strategies, branding initiatives, which is one thing that I am very focused on. AI is definitely a tool that needs to be explored so you can control costs, so you can improve velocity, so you can position our businesses for significant growth. And a final bit of housekeeping here. As I mentioned earlier, we will be sharing this webinar with all registrants for the event. You're welcome to reach out to anybody. Our contact information for each of the panelists is on their slides here, which you'll be getting. And if you're not already following Advancing Global EDU on LinkedIn, please do so. Mike Campbell, who was on here at the beginning, his face was on here, is going to be at TCEA really soon, right? So if you're going to be there, keep an eye out for him, book a meeting with him if you want to talk about this or any of these other business challenges you might be thinking about, and where we might be able to help. And that's really about it for now. I appreciate it. We'll circle back on some of the questions that are in the chat. I think a lot of them were addressed while we were there, but thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you, Matt and Joe and Al, and have a great day, everyone. Thank you.